Hi, I'm Dr. Micah Sellers, and welcome to Forces of Change, where we decode disruption at the intersection of technology, policy, and purpose.
And I'm Annie Graziani. I'm co host of Forces of Change. And today we have Dr. Mark Ma. He's an associate professor at the University of Pittsburgh, and he studies what happens when organization power collides with empirical evidence. And he examines everything from return to office mandates to DEI initiatives and corporate tax evasion. His research keeps revealing the same pattern. Executives make decisions that satisfy their preferences but undermine their stated goals. So welcome, Dr. Mark Ma.
Oh, thank you for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here to chat with you guys, and it's a great opportunity to probably help spread my research findings.
Let's start right here. Your research tackles some of the most pressing questions about how our economy and our society actually function, from future of work and DEI to corporate transparency, sustainability, etc. What connects these seemingly disparate threads? What are you really investigating beneath the surface?
So that was a big question, and I studied, and there were debates about whether DEI is good, DEI is bad, and actually, what is DEI? Right? So no, like people all talk about DEI, but what exactly is DEI? I think there are a lot of debates, and there was not much empirical evidence. So we also looked at the impact of a good DEI program in a company. And we found that if you have a very good DEI program in the company during the pandemic, you actually suffer less from labor shortage. That's because people are less likely to leave, and it's easier for you to hire. And also, there is a growing. I think that will be a big issue over the next 5 to 10 years. There is a big growing, not only social inequality, but economic inequality because of the development of AI, all this technology, all these people are getting laid off. Well, a lot of a few people are getting wealthier and wealthier because of the use of AI, right? So I think this equality will be a big issue, not only in the US, but all around the world. Yeah, and then after the pandemic, finally I got tenure at University of Pittsburgh. After getting tenure, I started to think like, what's the meaning of keeping publishing if these papers do not really make the society better, or if most people in the society do not know what you have done, right? So I started questioning that, and I decided that I will start researching some research questions that's most important for the society, and that keeps the CEOs up at night. And at that time, after the pandemic, the biggest social issue was return to office mandate. And there were debates on both sides, very heated debate on both sides, and people hold very different views about return to office or working from home, but there was no empirical research evidence. So basically, what we did is we provided the first empirical research analysis about whether these return to office mandates actually help the firms or whether they are good for the employees, right? So that's what we did. And I think what connects these different areas together is really I'm trying to look at how I could provide some research funding that informs policy making and potentially make the society a little bit better.
Some of what we connected about in the beginning, Mark, in our relationship is related to my research, which was sort of more related to post the mandated RTO, since you've done so much research in that space. My research is really related to more related to like employee well-being and organizational performance and the effect on organizational bottom line, right? The economic impact of employee well-being. So, one of your most popular topics is exactly this, right? Mandated return to office, which has been downloaded over 17,000 times, featured all over the place, from Washington Post to BBC. And I guess I'd like to hear your voice on, this relationship between employee satisfaction, employee well-being, and organizational performance. Is there a relationship there? Is there not a relationship there? And like, what is it about the leaders that we're talking about and why they keep making these decisions?
Yeah, so I think your view will be very different depending on whether you take a long-term view or a short-term view, right? So the conclusions will be completely different. So if you are just taking a very short-term view, of course you ask your employees to overwork as much as possible, right? So you will next quarter's revenue will probably go up, but these employees will get burned out over the long term, and their productivity will decline. So that then what will really decide the long term game is whether you could replace these employees with new employees. But in a tight labor market, that's very hard to do. In some other labor market like China, a lot of these companies, that's exactly what they are trying to do. Like ask these employees work as hard as possible and then replace them with new blood, right? So that's not sustainable over the long term, even in China, because the population is also declining. And also, I think we need to think about this question: what's the meaning of work, or what's the meaning of business? Like, is at the end of the day, is the only thing we care about is making more profit? Or why do we have all this business? Should we make people's life better? Isn't that the meaning of all this? Like, you are already a multi-millionaire or even a billionaire. Why do you still like try to chase the last dollar of profit, right? So does that still make meaning? Like, is that still meaningful for you? Like, you will not like all these billionaires. Uh, they will not be able to spend all their money, right? So none of them. When your wealth reach a certain level, you will not be spending your money, and you will not be able to give this money to your heirs. And if you give too much money to your heirs may actually run into problems. To be honest, because uh when I talk to a alumni who is an advisor for a lot of family business, and he told me it's very hard to pass wealth, no matter how wealthy you are. It's very hard to pass wealth over 3 generations, right? So no matter how wealthy you are, it is very hard because uh like if you become so wealthy and your child will not be working hard. Right? So so in 3 generations your wealth will probably get reduced, or like get reduced by a significant portion. And no matter whether you have let's say uh 10 billion or like 20 billion, like 10 billion, 20 billion, that's like double the amount. But in 2 generations, 3 generations, that doesn't make actually doesn't make any difference. And for the individual himself or herself, 10 million, 20 million, it also doesn't really make a difference because you can't use that money, right? Most of your money will be in investment. Right? So it won't really change your life. So at the end of the day, we need to think about the meaning of wealth, and whether we want to always try to maximize the wealth, or whether we want to treat these other people also a little bit better, right? So the society is better, and actually, when the society is better, it's better. It's more likely that you could pass along your wealth so to the next generation, right? So if you are the only wealthy person in the society, everyone else is living such a horrible life. I mean, how likely you could safely pass your wealth to the next generation? There we go. I don't think you can do that safely, right? So there will be social unrest or even a revolution, right? So if the inequality reach a certain level, so I think we need to rethink what's the meaning of work and what's the meaning of wealth.
It's interesting when you mentioned, you're looking at corporations, right? That are focused exclusively, right, on increasing shareholder value, or they're looking specifically, at moving the profit needle from quarter to quarter, and they lack certain altruistic values in terms of, like, what are we contributing to society? In your studies, did you see like any structural difference, or any ideological difference, right, in the companies, right, that are more altruistic, where maybe that altruism, um, blends, shareholder values with the company's mission and purpose versus those that are really just focused on kind of bottom line profit. Was there what were the differences in that you surfaced in your study?
Yeah, I I think that's a very important issue, and uh, because a lot of CEOs are not the real owners of the company, so they may not even own a significant share of the company's stock, right? So they do not really have much bargaining power in the process. What I have found is if the CEO is also the founder of the company, who will be much more powerful and less likely to be removed from the post. In that case, the firm usually actually treats the employee better, right? So one case is Jensen Huang of NVIDIA. So he is the founder, he's the CEO. He actually allows everyone to work for choose where you want to work. You can choose to work in the office or choose to work from home, right? So and he said that his biggest achievement is that he created so many millionaires inside his company, right? So, but if it's a professional manager, like he will be so concerned about his job security. Like if the stock price crash next quarter, I will probably lose my job, right? So in that case, the view will be very, very different. Uh, I think there are benefits of developing the stock market. Definitely, you could have found these innovative projects, these innovative companies providing the capital so they could innovate. But on the other hand, the capital market definitely make like short-term thinking even worse, right? So that's the double-edged sword of capital market. I think it's uh yeah, what like also the capital people who benefit capital market also like benefit really just the people who have money to make investment. But for those in the bottom of the like social economic ladder, they don't have money to invest. So that actually also creates a big inequality problem, right? So I think we also need to very carefully think about like the role of capital market in the society. You should not just like always focus on whether the Nasdaq set another new record high, right? So sometimes it's really Nasdaq set a new record high, billionaires become wealthier, but the middle class people they don't live a good life, right? So I think we need to really systematically reevaluate all these.
Yeah, we're seeing that right now, aren't we? We're seeing that, the capital markets are doing insanely well, but at the same time, right, we're seeing, a rise in joblessness, and we're seeing, a decline in the labor market, less people getting hired. And that's, structurally different today than it was, in previous, periods of recession, right? We're seeing now where even younger employees, recent college grads are having a hard time actually finding work. Kind of circling back to what you said, Mark, what I find is interesting, is when you're looking at, kind of, causation correlation, right? Like, you're looking at, what a lot of these companies, when they're making decisions on whether or not their internal policies, right, should be human first and maybe slightly more altruistic in terms of like, what is the benefit of the company to society. Those CEOs are CEOs that are like yes and then the other ones, right, who are making the decision, on just increasing shareholder value or meeting an analyst's expectations on a quarter by quarter basis. They're making decisions that seem rather binary, as opposed to additive.
Yes, yes, I definitely there are different types of CEOs, and the CEOs, many CEOs think very differently. And about the current labor market, I actually also read an article in the Hill last week, which is published last week. Clearly, AI is still at a very early stage, but it's already leading to this layoff, especially in the tech and the finance industry, right? So that's creating a big problem because it used to be the best students in universities get into tech and finance. And now these best students, when they graduate, they can't find jobs. Right? So they were the best students, so they can get into the business school or get into the CS programs. And now, 4 years later, they graduate, they can't find a job. I think that's a waste of talent. That's also a big social problem. And what I have been proposing on the different various all media outlets and also on different conference is we actually need to have a shorter work week. So the idea is uh, clearly AI will reduce labor demand, right? So uh, a lot of people will be will lose their job, and AI is still at a very very early stage. As it further gets to an advanced stage, it will be able to companies will be able to replace a lot of workers. And there are like a few people, a few CEOs who say that AI will create new jobs. But when you ask them what job will be created, like the solution, sometimes what they tell you is you need to use your imagination. When did you see that? Like you need to use your imagination. I don't believe them, right? And I could not imagine what job that will be created but cannot be replaced by AI, right? So I think AI will lead to a big labor market problem, and so labor demand will certainly be lower. And what we need to do is we also need to lower labor supply. And so when you reach a new equilibrium, and in theory, you can take home the same wage or the same salary. Why? A lot of people say like if you work only 3 days or 4 days a week, uh, you will get paid less. That's not necessarily true if everyone works much less, because these AI are still not like completely 100% perfect. So there still need to be some human in the loop. Like AI may be doing the coding, but there need to be human who do the who double check the coding and correct the errors. So there is a still demand for human workers. And as long as there is a demand for human worker, companies need to compete with each other for the talent. And if we efficiently reduce the overall level of labor supply, we say that everyone is only allowed to work for 30 hours a week or 20 hours a week. And then this company will still need to compete with each other. And at the end, maybe like labor demand decrease by a certain percentage, but we decrease labor supply by a bigger percentage. Your wage could actually go up rather than going down.
It's interesting.
Mark, I have a question for you here. Is the what's missing is if we're going to, work to sort of change how the economy works, and we know this is coming down, or it feels like this is coming down the pike, right? How the business world works. What is, for all the researchers out there, what are the gaps in research that can help facilitate this movement starting to take shape, with a little bit more meaning?
What we really need is some way that we could change the short-term thinking of the managers. So they would start to look at evidence rather than just the short-term firm performance or short-term stock performance. I think that will be very very difficult, but that's what we will have to do. Like at several conferences, I talked to these chief economists of these big banks, and I told them like if you do not have a shorter work week, that will collapse the consumer economy. And they all agree. But like they said, like nothing we can do. Right? There's nothing we can do. And also most of these banks probably will profit if they further lay off. So uh so I think we need to completely change their incentive and make them become more socially aware, and stop short-term thinking, and that's the way to move forward. And uh, also, I know that it's very difficult to change the corporation world. The corporate world, they all have this incentive to maximize short-term performance, and then the only solution left is a public policy change, right? So public policy change, you need to elect senators and congressmen who really care about these social issues, right? So if you think that your job is not so secure or you are facing the risk of layoff, you should go to your congressman and ask them what's your opinion about this, right? So you should go to vote for that person who want to promote a shorter work week, right? So I think that's what we as the normal people can do, right? So call your congressman and vote for the people who really want to promote a better work-life balance and promote a shorter work week.
Yeah, you mentioned the four-day work week, a number of times in this conversation. And I'm really intrigued by it. And I totally agree that there's no correlation, right, between the amount of time you put in and the results that you're producing, for your employer. I wonder though, it's interesting when you look at most of the countries that have experimented, right, with the 4-day work week. Where are they? They're in Europe, and
Yes,
so if you look at cultural context, you look at the social fabrics in Western societies, in particular in the United States, the historical context of you're going to go to work and you're going to grind out 40, and if you're a go getter, you're going to put in 50. If you're a superstar, you're probably putting in 60, right? But that's been so ingrained into the idea of how we work in America and how we achieve in America. That and the
yes,
gap in achievement is often perceived. Well, you just didn't work hard enough, or you didn't work enough hours, right? To actually be at the level that you want to be to continue to ascend. Yeah. What are the cultural differences that we should be examining, in our society, of how we perceive and value work, and how we perceive and value that other side of the equation, right, which is your life outside of work, and how that
yes.
affects your ability to be better at work.
Yes. Yeah, sometimes I question myself, like, is the meaning of my whole life is just to get that income? So I'll try to maximize my income. So I work like 24 hours a day so I could potentially get a raise next year. Like, is that all I want to do? Right. So that sometimes I question myself. But what I observe is what's really unfortunate is all these many of these leaders, they work super hard to become successful. And so when people started talking about work-life balance, they really don't like it. And these leaders, they do not understand the life of a normal person. Like, to be honest, to be successful is not only hardworking. Like a lot of people work very hard, but they are not successful. It also takes some luck, right? So you need to be, like, also it's a combination of luck and effort really lead to most success, right? So, but there are people who work very hard and do not really get an opportunity to become successful. And those business leaders who are really successful, who works really hard, think, oh, it's not, it's they attribute their success to their effort rather than their luck, right? So for most of the time, that's what they think. So they think people who are not as successful are not working hard enough. It's actually, I believe that for most people, it's really, no matter how hard you work, you will not be that successful, right? So therefore, you should actually prioritize your life a little bit more, right? But the business leaders who are making these decisions, they do not think so because they think their success is because of their hard work, and so that's, I think that's the dilemma. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if we'll see generational differences in this approach, right? Because I think, when you're looking at, my generation, Gen X, or those that came before us, the boomers and whatnot, the the perception we have of what work is and what work should be, I think, is very, very different than the generations that have come after us and those that are still to come. You're seeing, a lot more value centric systems, right? In those generations where they're focused on family and friends, and the role and the relationship between the employer and the employee. Their perception of that relationship is very different than my generation and the generations that came before me.
Yes, there are definitely a very big difference between different generations in their views about this issue. And clearly, the younger generation value work-life balance a lot better. I think that's also because our economy has reached a certain level, right? So it used to be like there is such a big scarcity of products, and you have to work hard to produce so people could live better. And now we are already living in such a affluent society, right? So therefore, like these young people, like they could make a compromise. I don't need to become a millionaire. I just want to have a middle class life. I would be able to afford that 18.5-inch flat TV. Right, so it used to be you can only afford a big TV if you are working very hard, but now like that big TV is only a few $100, right? So most people can afford that. I think we have reached a certain level, so uh, like people will not want to like sacrifice their life in order to make more money. And ultimately, think about this in 20 years. Think about this in 20 years, people only work, let's say, 10 hours a week. And then all your time left, you need to think about how to get yourself in the tent. And also, what's the meaning of life, right? So I think that people will really need to rethink about all these issues like in the next 10 or 20 years, because you will work much less. Whether you will have a job or not, you will work much less. And then we will need to take a look back and at the beginning, like why do we need to work so hard? That's because we want to make life better. That's the reason why we want to work, right? So we want to make the life better. And now life is better. Do we still need to work so hard? And I think that's a question uh a lot of people will need to rethink. The society will really need to rethink.
Mark, I feel like we could talk all day. All these topics are just so interconnected and so compelling, and it very much aligns with much of the research I'm doing, and much of what Micah has researched too. So we really could talk for hours. We ask all of our guests two specific questions, and the first one I'll ask, and then Micah, you can ask the second one. But the first one is, relative to the forces of change society is facing right now, what are the four forces driving transformation that you think leaders, policymakers, and citizens should be paying attention to?
Well, the first one is definitely AI technology, right? So AI is changing the economy completely and changing the labor market very very quickly. And the second force is in the U.S. specifically, the level of diversity of the population will only get higher. It will not go down. That's just the demographic data, right? So how to make sure that we have an inclusive environment that such a diverse population will thrive? I think that's the second biggest issue. And then related to diversity is economic inequality. Like because of AI, so many people will uh, lose their job, and that will widen the gap between the wealthy and the poor. And how could we address this gap so that our society could move forward? I think that's another big change. And in the end, I think if I have to give a fourth one, I think also sustainability will be very very important again. In the future. Like we don't talk about sustainability anymore now, but as I said, like when we can do large scale manufacturing using robots, the last limit will be the natural resource. Right, so the bottleneck issue, the constraint will be the natural resource. So if we don't have unlimited natural resource, so we will have to reserve our natural resource, and also have to recycle all these materials. So in the end, I think sustainability will also become a very big issue.
Couldn't agree more. Y- y- we ask all of our guests, when you think about the last year, maybe even 2 years, what is the most interesting and important book that you've read that you think would be beneficial for our listeners to read?
Uh, Most books I read are academic books, and probably your reader, your listeners would not be interested. But there is one book, my wife recommended to me, and I read it, and I found it to be very, very interesting. It's Bad Blood, which is about Elizabeth Holmes, like that. Her company, how they lied and to the top, right? So, and also what's really interesting in that book is uh all these wealthy, successful people investing in that company. Right. So they invested their own money into that company. Right. So in a lot of people's view, these highly successful, wealthy individuals, they must be very, very smart. They they have some kind of intelligence that other people do not have. That's why they become so successful. But they were all fooled by this 19-year-old. And I think that's a very interesting story, and like that shows a lot about how the society actually works. A lot of times it's actually that you become successful because you are not only because you are working hard, but really because uh, you have the opportunity, or you happen to be at the right position. You were lucky enough, right? So even for those very, very successful, very, very wealthy individuals, they could be easily fooled by a 19-year-old Stanford dropout.
And it's I think a lot of them, you're right. I mean, they're super smart and they should have been able to kind of sniff that out. I think Theranos was peddling, something that was like almost like alchemy, right? Like you're like, ooh, it's magic, but
Yes.
it's so far fetched, that it can happen in the way that was describing it, and nobody was actually, checking to see, if these if the outcomes right were valid. Um, but you're right. It was a really I read the book myself. It was really interesting. And it's certainly a case study, I think, for every single business school out there.
Yes, it is. It is a very, very interesting case to study fraud. I actually asked my student to write a two-page article about this.
Fantastic.
Well, Mark, this has been, intriguing, totally enlightening, of a conversation, and we just want to thank you for your time today. Where can listeners follow your work and learn more about you?
Oh yes, you are welcome to connect with me through LinkedIn. I periodically share my research findings and my thoughts on LinkedIn.
Amazing.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank
Thank you.
you.